Good morning. Today is the 30th of October, 2022. The American Yank is our gang, but right now we're the ones that are on the outside of society. And when we go to stand up for ourselves, we find we have to address such issues as abortion. And since they do such a good job of hiding behind the very girls we want to push to the top of society, and since it's such a controversial issue, it seems important to stop and address it. Somebody explained to me once that the young girl is beside herself in panic and she just wants to run in this direction or the other. And from the point of view of the guy, he's simply beside himself if he doesn't make enough money to support a wife and child. So let's stop and continue. When the person you're listening to was in elementary school or one of the elementary schools, you could simply walk a mile down a side street, you would come to a vacant lot. You would cross the vacant lot into the alley, and on the other side of the alley was our house. And if you wanted to, you could cross a small lot down the side of the garage into the driveway and back out to the front of the street, and the road curved is what caused it. And there was a lot of room. It was very obvious. You could drive a car from the alley to the street if you wanted to. One of the girls that was in my class wanted to ride her bicycle through our driveway so she could take a shortcut to her house. And I ran out and stopped her. "You mustn't do that," I kept saying. "You have to go around." It was a rather violent times, and one of the reasons it was such a violent time was because there were black guys rioting, and they would cut through that area. My oldest sister went out to find out what was going on one time, and they shoved her to the ground, saying they didn't take that from white women. I remember standing in front of the girl, holding on to her handlebars and saying, "You must go around, you must go around." And she finally did. And years later, I stopped and wondered if she ever realized that I was trying to keep her out of violence. A few years later, I was in junior high, and something happened, and it was serious. And at the time, all I could really do is break down crying. I happened to be in shop class at the time, and I started doing that. And one of the students got up and went to tell the teacher. I simply couldn't believe it. I was completely convinced that he was trying to kill me. I just sat there wondering, what did I ever do to him? It wasn't until years later I realized that maybe he had other motives. A few years after that, the person you're listening to was applying for a job. It was inside a jail, and I had to take a test from a psychologist. It was rather lengthy. He even made me look at those ink blocks. And afterwards, he said he was going to recommend me for the job. But then he stopped and gave me quite a lecture. He wanted me to understand that in this world there are people who are nice, and that there are some people who just aren't nice, and that I didn't realize the second part of that. One more. We're back in elementary school now, and one of my elementary school buddies was across the street and down a few houses. And when school ended and he finished playing his violin, you could tell, the whole neighborhood could tell, I would go over there and I would enter through the secret man from Uncle entrance, and we would play for a while, and then I'd go home and go to dinner. It didn't last long though, because he was trying to be raised by his aunt, and his aunt just couldn't do it. So he had to move back to one of the major inner cities on the East Coast. Let's pick on Chicago for the purposes of this anecdote, because it's been in the news. His aunt was a stereotypical American housewife, and all they had to do was come across with a budget, and so she could raise her kid. She just couldn't do it. In fact, it's impossible to do. You can't go out and support the child and raise them at the same time. Now daydream a little bit, if you would, please. There's the American housewife, and now they're entering into the housing projects in Chicago, and they're the ones who have been aborted. The people who built those housing projects, Al the Afro and Harry the Hippie and Donna and Francis the Feminist, they're the ones who are doing the aborting. The people, it doesn't have to be housing projects. It could be the people who bought property and rent it out to you, and you have to do the renting and they get to do the consuming. They're the ones doing the abortion. They're the ones who are committing the abortion, and you're the ones that are being aborted. And who's completely on the outside of society? Well, the American housewife. You can compare the two worlds. Compare what it was like if she had an income and could simply raise our buddy and probably a couple more. And think of what life is like growing up in those housing projects. And then again, I think of what life is like for the people who built those housing projects. They lived rather high off the hog. This anecdote is starting to get a bit long, so let's continue it on the other anecdotes.